Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Zoe and today I'm making a modified 1894 walking suit pattern. As you can see here, I am treating these skirt panels as if they are one piece of fabric with the outer layer of wool and the inner lining layer of cotton twill cut and sewn together as if they're one piece of fabric in a technique called flatlining. I'm just sewing the two pieces very loosely together so that they don't shift when I put them under my sewing machine. Once I'd sewn the four panels of the skirt together, the front, two side seams and the back seam, I pressed the seams open with my iron using a nice amount of steam so that I could hand fill the seams at a later date. In order to attach the waistband, I created a large rectangle pieced together of scrappy little bits of fabric I have left over, because as we all know, piecing is period. I left a little extension that would work as part of the placket closure for the back. I sewed the main length down by machine, and once I'd folded it in half, pressed it, folded the seam allowance under for the inside, I then felled it down. And here I am hand felling down the seams at said later date. You may notice that I have a hat that looks like a mushroom. This is because this entire time I was working as a children's entertainer at a pumpkin fair, which was rather fun actually. I think I'm going to finish this by the time I get home. I'm going to need to start a new hand sewing project. So what, shall I finish this seam and then shall we call it a day and go home? Yeah. Sorry about the terrible lighting, it's like 6 o'clock and way dark, but I am just putting some bias binding on the bottom of my skirt. I'm going to turn it under, do a row of cording, but I thought if anybody does see like the little flash of blue that it'd be quite cute, and also because the lining's white, I thought that it would help protect the area that's like nearest the ground. That was the idea anyway, so I'm just going to pop this on by machine and then do some cording. In hindsight, I wish that I had just bias bound the edge of the hem rather than folding it over, as it made the skirt just a tiny bit short in front, but such is life. Due to the number of pins, this involved a rather large amount of stopping and starting. And you may be thinking, but Zoe, pockets! Fear not, viewer, I did eventually remember to add one. It did mean that I had to enter into the exciting world of adventure that is welted pockets, and I'd never done one before, so I didn't film it, and then I just sewed the pocket bag by hand for a reason that honestly I could not tell you now. Because my colleagues at the fair had seen me for the last week sewing this skirt, they demanded that I wear it to work the next day, which I duly did. Luckily for me, it's Halloween, so I can get away with dressing like a Victorian at work. Which leads us nicely on to the next stage of our adventure, making the waistcoat. While I originally had no plans to make a waistcoat to go with this skirt, as you can see, I've already got one, it didn't really go, and I found the black and the brown really annoying, so I had some material left over from a linen cotton dress I had dismantled to make my mushroom stays. Editing Zoe will add a photo for you now. No, wrong mushroom, Zoe. Try again. Once my lining fabric was nice and ironed, I moved on to ironing in the hand-sewn darts, which I absolutely could have done by machine, but I needed a hand-sewn project while I was at work and to keep myself busy, and then I did the rest of the construction by machine. I've sewn up everything bar the armholes and left a bit at the bottom to turn it inside out. I'm not sure if this is the period technique, thought I'd give this a go, because it meant I didn't need to sew anything by hand. I'm just not in the mood. I've done a lot of hand sewing already for this project.
I did a quick fit check way too late at night to film and realised that I should probably put a couple of bits of boning into the waistcoat. The only issue was I'd sewn up all of the seams by that point, so I just poked it into the channel made by the top stitching by creating a hole in the fabric with an awl and jamming the bone in there, then sewing it closed. In reality, I probably could have got away with sewing 6 buttons and 6 buttonholes and then doing some fake buttons by just sewing them on where they didn't have to be functional. But I wasn't smart and didn't do this, so there you have it. It's by no means a proper technique, but the easiest way I found of making sure that my buttonholes correspond with where I want the buttons to be is to just pin it closed, find the center of the buttonhole, I just align where I want it. I'll remove these so they're out the way for the moment, and then I will just sew on my button. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, please feel free to like and subscribe. I would love it if you join me for more sewing shenanigans. I have plans to make a shirtwaist, which is Victorian for a blouse, and or possibly also a jacket to go with this ensemble. I just haven't quite got the fabric for that yet, because the skirt was made from a fabric remnant that I got at the charity shop for about £2.50, maybe £4 at most. I pre-washed the fabric, lost the tag, cannot remember how much it cost me. But I know that that amount of fabric, generally speaking from there, would never cost me more than about £4.50. So there was enough fabric to do the front and side panels of the skirt, but where the pattern calls for fabric pleated down onto the waistband, I had 20 centimeters genuinely. So it is not as full at the back as I would ideally like it to be. It is what it is. I'm really happy with the fit. I much prefer the back opening than when I first made this pattern. I didn't film that because I made the suit to wear to a funeral, so I wanted to be able to do it again and take time with it. I am overall very happy with how it turned out. I'm kind of considering this like a wearable mock-up because it's a much heavier fabric than I originally made the pattern in, and I wanted to know how that would work. I definitely have plans to do a matching blouse with these really big sleeves which came on the pattern. It is from the book Authentic Victorian Patterns, which I will put a link to in the description. I absolutely love it. It's definitely not for beginner sewists because it basically does not include directions. There are pattern pieces, you have to scale them up to your measurements. Maths is just like the Trojan horse of sewing that we all have to live with. And the lack of construction instructions can be a little bit mind-bending. I've actually worn this waistcoat quite a lot. I made the fit a little bit more boxy than I did the first time I made this pattern, and that was intentional. I feel like the boxy fit makes it look a little bit more modern and slightly less Victorian. I definitely think that I will be making this a third time because I still want to tweak the pattern just a wee bit. Why I didn't do fake buttons and buttonholes and only do maybe 6 buttons that were actually functional, I couldn't tell you. It was a terrible decision and one that I will not be repeating. I also forgot to put the boning in before I finished the top stitching, and I wasn't willing to unpick it. So in my infinite wisdom, at 10 o'clock at night, I decided, fuck it. So I took my awl, I made a hole, I put the boning into the top stitching as a makeshift boning channel. Shan't be repeating that again either. It works really well for the underplacket. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to alter this. Now I've worn this waistcoat a couple of days in a row. I've got a really good idea of how it fits. I've got an idea about like issues I'm finding with wearing it, and you can see it's just kind of like being held open in a way that's not very flattering, and it have to have it pinned closed at the bottom because I did the buttons like slightly diagonally because that's something I've seen on nearly every fashion plate and extant garment from this period that I've examined. I didn't want to have buttons straight up and down because they don't help with like the hourglass silhouette illusion. So I did them like this, only I didn't like alter the pattern of the placket to mirror where I was going to put my buttons. Again, terrible decision, not one I'll be repeating. Take this bone out. I'm going to just sew a wee boning channel. Probably, honestly, I'm just going to sew it to the interior with a piece of bias binding or something. And then I'm going to put this bit of boning so it's on the under placket and not the over placket. And then I'm probably just going to do maybe like a hook and eye here and a hook and eye at the bottom and potentially one at the top here, and just do thread bars. I still think that I could do with shortening it at the back a little bit. I'm very short-waisted. I shortened it even more than the original, and it still wrinkles at the back. And I'm aware that this is my job, and I should know what I'm doing, but unfortunately, when I sew for myself, it's often later in the evening, and occasionally that results in very questionable decision-making that I'm not proud of. I think the decision to do the cording in the skirt was a really good one because it gives it like a nice body. If you want to see more behind the scenes stuff, I do have an Instagram where I tend to post like update pics, and when I'm doing fittings and stuff like that often goes on there on my stories. I am hopefully going to be able to continue with my weekly upload schedule for videos, and I'm really enjoying this as a hobby. So I do appreciate everybody who has decided to come along on this adventure with me. I'm very flattered that anybody bothers watching my videos at all. It's nice to connect with other people who are also interested in the same thing, because it is a slightly strange thing to do, make Victorian clothes in your living room. And if that's your vibe, feel free to like and subscribe and come along with that. That would be awesome. If you have any kind of historical costume, let me know in the comments. I would love to know what everybody else is making and wearing at the moment. I know that we've just had Halloween, so it's always a good excuse to make costumes for Halloween, isn't it? That's kind of why I made this one, to be honest. I'd already made the Mushroom Fairy costume, and then I was like, but I'm working the pumpkin patch. I need more than one costume this year. I didn't. I really didn't. But I did it anyway because it's fun. And with that, I will see you next time. Over and out.